Evening. I'm Spot on Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler, and welcome to part two of the Spot on Weather 2022-23 Winter in Review. And tonight we're going to first start things off by taking a look at January 2023 and how the weather shaped up across the country, and then bring it in locally to Hampton Roads, Virginia cities. All right, so let's start things off by taking a look at the upper air pattern, a very similar format to last night's video, part one, where I just took snippets of various time periods. I try to space the intervals of the time periods within certain ranges, no more than 10 days apart, just to get a feel for what the upper air pattern actually looked like in January of 2023. All right, so starting with things off here on the left, and again, as a reminder, purple and green coloring indicates anomalously low heights in the atmosphere at 500 millibars or 18,000 feet, as well as this blue coloring also indicates below normal heights at 500 millibars. And whenever you see the orange coloring, that's associated with upper level ridges and generally with higher heights in the atmosphere. All right, so starting here on the left with the 500 millibar chart for the 10th of January 2023. As I alluded to yesterday, the beginning of the new year started off very warm across the eastern United States. After that holiday or the Christmas time period, Arctic outbreak. And now, moving forward 10 days from the start of the new year, this is what the chart looked like. There was a deep upper level closed low situated off the west coast of the United States. So a very intense upper level trough at 500 millibars on the 10th of January 2023. And as we worked eastward towards the Rockies, we generally saw some ridging, as well as some ridging across the Ohio Valley in the Midwest. And then there was an area of lower heights or troughing off the east coast of the United States. There were some higher heights up further north as well on the 10th of January 2023. Up towards central Canada and even working further north at the higher latitudes. Overall, we had a Pacific jet stream for the most part. This Pacific jet was still very strong at this point in time. A zonal west to east flow from the west to the east coast. And you kind of can pick that out by the packing of these height contours and the orientation of the height contours. We do see a few short waves embedded within this pattern, specifically over the central U.S., definitely a deeper shortwave off the U.S. West Coast, as I mentioned. So that's pretty much the pattern from the first 10 days of January. Very strong Pacific jet, continued. And then over here on the right, let's see how things change by the 15th of January 2023. Now we see that deep upper level closed low moving in that trough, that very intense shortwave trough moving into Northern California by this point in time. And as this trough deepened out in the west, as it moved into California and Oregon, downstream of that deepening trough, we typically get an opposite reaction of the atmosphere where the heights rise drastically. And so now, 15 January, we have, look at the comparisons here. This is 10 January. We do see some higher heights indicated by these orange colors. But when you go over here on the right, 15 January, look how more intense or deeper hue colors of this higher heights, this maroon and orange coloring here. Very high heights, anomalously high heights across central Canada by the 15th of January. And then downstream of this building ridge, we had a fairly deep trough off the mid-Atlantic coast. Now, I will say from, just remembering back in this time period, across southeastern Virginia, specifically around the Hampton Roads cities of Virginia, right along the coastal portions, we did see some snow flurries on this particular afternoon. I do remember that. And that was mainly due to this northerly induced gradient, northerly winds blowing down the fetch of the Chesapeake Bay, picking up moisture from the waters below in what's known as the Bay Streamer effect. But they were very few and far between, didn't really amount to much. Banding of these bay streamers or snow showers downwind of the Chesapeake Bay into eastern Virginia really didn't materialize into nothing but a couple flurries. But I do remember this particular day, the high was only 38 degrees for the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area, as this deep trough really enhanced the northerly flow on its backside. So this was a rare case of where we actually had some, temperatures that actually felt like winter around the 15th of January. Now, further downstream of this deep trough off the mid-Atlantic coast, there is another building ridge here across the North Atlantic, generally to the south of Greenland, actually. Now let's move ahead to January 20th here on the left, showing this ridge here building into the northeastern Pacific. Downstream of that ridge, we see that trough, that green color in here, that shortwave trough really set across parts of Nevada and parts of western Utah. And then we see a little bit of a weak ridging across the lee side of the Rocky Mountains from eastern Colorado on up to Wyoming, followed by another closed low situated over the Great Lakes by the 20th of January. And then you notice the higher heights again here up over Hudson Bay, over central Canada, anomalously high heights positioned above these lower heights over the upper Midwest. Now pay attention to this feature here. This was a 588 decameter upper level ridge, generally over the Caribbean, and that's really going to have a major impact. You're going to see those impacts as we progress through the time period. So in general, this is what we have going on. If we look over here on the right, we go 5 days later on the 25th of January 2023. Now look how strong this ridge is built there off the west coast of Canada, right up into the Gulf of Alaska. You notice this? These brown colors here now are indicating much higher than normal heights just off British Columbia. And then look at downstream of this upper level ridge. Look at this digging trough all the way down into Texas. A closed low over Oklahoma and parts of the Dallas-Fort Worth area by the 25th of January. Downstream of this anomalously deep trough over Texas, we see a response in the atmosphere again. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So as this trough was digging south, the ridge along the U.S. East Coast was building northward. And we see ridging, complete control over the mid-Atlantic, strongest or highest heights over Ohio, Pennsylvania, down to West Virginia, Virginia, as well as North Carolina by the 25th of January 2023. This was just the beginning of the persistent southeastern ridge. So, you think, looking at this chart here back on mid-January, you're thinking, well, maybe, this is just going to be a transitory ridge that's just going to pass through, for maybe a day or two and warm temperatures up and then move off the coast. That's not going to be the case. Now I'm going to move forward in time even further. I'm going to show you the 28th of January on the left, and I'm going to show you the 31st of January, what the 500 millibar level upper air charts look like on those particular dates. And look how strong, here on the left, 28 January, look how strong this ridge is. Look how strong this ridge is. And it's extending from south to north, the ridge axis, all the way up into parts of the eastern Aleutians into western Alaska. This is a very important piece here. See how intense this ridge is? And then the further this amplifies and builds all the way up into Alaska, the deeper the trough becomes. We have shorter wavelengths here, short wavelength type systems. And look at the northerly flow coming straight down into the western U.S. We have a deep closed low at this point in time up over the polar areas. See the green coloring here indicating those lower than normal heights in the upper levels of the atmosphere. We have general lower heights extending from eastern Oregon across the northern plains to the Midwest, right on into the Ohio Valley. We do see the subtropical ridge here, infamously known as the southeastern ridge, positioned over Cuba and over the Dominican Republic on the 28th of January 2023. So the ridging has moved off the East Coast temporarily by the 28th of January. We see another very strong ridge poking up into the North Atlantic. Now, look over here on the right and let's see how things progress with the upper level features. The closed upper level low has now moved to a position. We have a new closed low that has developed off the coast of Southern California. Off LA down to San Diego, we have a deep closed upper level low. So we have this deep trough that's establishing itself, Southern California and Northern Baja. And we see another very, very deep upper level low, which is positioned well north, just in the northern portions actually of Hudson Bay, Canada. The coldest air is going to be associated with these lower heights from the northern portions of Hudson Bay, Canada, extending southwestward into central Canada, the northern plains, right on to southern California. This is your area by the 31st of January 2023 that had the coldest temperatures and the lowest heights. As this system digs down into the southwestern U.S., we're going to start seeing the predominance of this subtropical ridge that's positioned now into the Gulf of Mexico, eastern Gulf of Mexico, and over Cuba. We're starting to see some of those higher heights building from the Gulf of Mexico northward to New England by the 31st of January. Now let's take a look at some of the temperature anomalies we experienced during January 2023. We look at the graphic here on the left that shows you the 10th of January. These are mean temperature anomalies. And you're seeing what's going on here. So we have a little bit of a cool down around the 10th of January across the mid-Atlantic. Not very strong of a cool down, not a very deep chill. And then we have warmer temperatures now moving in from Texas, extending northeastward to Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota. And look at Canada right now. It's so incredibly above normal by this point in time. Do you see any blue across Canada? Look at that. Nothing. There's nothing there. We generally have that west to east flow of air with a strong Pacific jet stream. So we generally have milder Pacific air that has flooded the United States. If we look over here on the right at the temperature anomalies now for Sunday the 15th of January, that's when we had that deep closed low, that deep upper level low off the mid-Atlantic coast at this time. That helped to drag down so much cooler air from the north. You see how chilly the 15th of January was, 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit below normal temperatures in the Sunshine State. And then look what's ahead here. Look what's upstream of the eastern U.S. by this point. We have temperatures in the order of 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in the upper Midwest, even in the parts of the Panhandle of Texas and this would be eastern New Mexico. We have nothing but mild temperatures in Canada, above normal temperatures upstream. Okay. And again, as I mentioned, locally for the Hampton Roads cities, I did observe some snow flurries, and that was pretty much it for the winter into Virginia Beach as these bay streamers, strong northerly wind component, blew over the fetch of the Chesapeake Bay. That was about it. Let's continue moving forward now. Temperature anomalies. This is for 20 January on the left. And what in the world happened here, folks? Look at the warmth spreading northeastward. The bullseye and the brown shading here, we're talking about temperatures in the order of 25 to 28 degrees Fahrenheit above normal by Friday the 20th of January across North Carolina into Virginia, even extending westward back towards West Virginia, eastern Kentucky. Look all the way up the East Coast, all the way to New England, 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit above normal temperatures. And then look at the western U.S. Greens and blues from western Nebraska all the way to California. I mean, look at this. Southern California, 10 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit below normal by the 20th of January. We look over here on the right, you can see the green area. It does expand a little bit further to the east. This was that time period where we have that deep trough, the closed upper level low over the Panhandle of Texas. And beneath that cold core upper low, we saw surface temperatures 16 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. This is the 25th of January, temperature anomalies on the right. So 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit below normal into northern Texas on the 25th of January. And then the general colder than normal temperatures are across northern Mexico, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, up to Wyoming. Look across New England here. 25 January, you're going, where in the world is winter when you see temperatures 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit above normal from Maine to New York State, and even across portions of the UP of Michigan and northern Minnesota. Now, moving forward to the 28th of January, temperature anomalies, we see now that we have warmer than normal temperatures extending along the Ohio River, 12 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit above normal by the 28th of January, 2023. And we also see some above normal temperature readings north of the Great Lakes area into southern Canada. Along the Gulf Coast, we see temperature anomalies generally running 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit below normal across South Georgia, portions of northern Florida. And with time, what's going to happen here? Look at this on the right. These are the temperature anomalies by the end of January, 31 January. Whoa, look at the purple coloring now. Beneath that upper level low in Texas, look how much colder things are getting. 30 to 35 degrees Fahrenheit below normal across Texas. And then generally the same across parts of western Nebraska into Wyoming and eastern Colorado. We have colder temperatures now over central and eastern Canada. And then look at this stream of warm air as the ridge really starts building across the southeast, the mid-Atlantic, up to New England. And we're talking temperatures now in Florida are on the order of 14 to 16 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. And then there's another bullseye of very warm temperatures across Virginia up to West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Philly, New York City. We're talking 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit above normal temperature anomalies by the 31st of January. Now, another thing I want to mention about these temperature anomalies here. When I see a distinct boundary like this between much above normal and then much below normal, I generally know there's some kind of cold front sitting right in here along the Ohio River, extending from western Tennessee right on up through central Kentucky, up to Cincinnati. Generally, there's a cold front here. This is where your baroclinic zone is on the 31st of January, okay? So storm development is going to basically occur right along that sharpest thermal or temperature contrast, and that's why you're getting some actual winter weather back in the Oklahoma area at this time, as well as North Texas. Meanwhile, as that trough was digging into Texas, the ridge built up and the milder air continued across the eastern U.S. Now, this is my hope every winter as a winter weather lover is I'm always looking at the location of this baroclinic zone. And if by chance these colder temperatures can make it over the Appalachians here, the mountains, along this boundary is where you're going to have the storms, persistent storms forming along this boundary. So whatever if this could have snuck a little bit further to the southeast or moved a little further to the southeast, this could have given us our best synoptic setup of the winter for frozen precip. However, that colder air just couldn't quite make it all the way to the east coast. And the main reason for that is it's just the strengthening upper level ridge. All right, now let's take a look at the teleconnections for January of 2023, starting with the Arctic oscillation. Generally in January, what we saw is a negative Arctic oscillation, generally the first couple weeks. But specifically, the second week to about the 18th of January, we saw a negative tendency to the Arctic oscillation. The problem is as we got closer to the end of the month, that Arctic oscillation turned positive. It also turned positive as we headed into early February. North Atlantic oscillation of January 2023, you'll notice how it was initially, of course, we talked about how negative it was in December of 2022, the NAO. But then ultimately, as we headed into January, it went more slightly positive and less negative. And then the forecast at this time, this was the 27th of January, this far graphic here on the right, showing a forecast for much stronger tendency to the positive side for the NAO as we went into early February. The Pacific North American pattern, the PNA phase for January 2023, showing a general positive phase of the PNA for the most part. But then by the end of the month, now this was the transition point, this was the key right here to me. We had a positive phase PNA, which does promote colder temperatures in the eastern U.S. However, that PNA trend went negative by the end of January. The Madden-Julian oscillation, I look back at that in January of 2023, generally showing on the left here, this was January the 13th, and on the right here I'm showing you January 27th. And so that green line is what I pay attention to. That's the average of all the ensemble forecast members of the GFS ensemble forecasting system, the GEFS, showing the MJO. Now this is where things were at a crossroads for the winter, and this really set the tone for the rest of the winter. During La Nina winter specifically, you very rarely get the MJO to rotate into phases 8 and 1. You just don't get it into those colder phases very often during MJO or the La Nina phase. Okay, and I remember looking at these forecasts back in the first couple of days, that first week of January, and initially the models were showing the MJO rotating into phase 8 and then into phase 1. Ultimately, what happened over time due to the La Nina is the MJO only rotated right along this null phase, the small inner circle here, the center of the diagram. The MJO just kept right along the border of the null phase, and then eventually it worked its way out into MJO phase 3. And if you look at over here, on the right, you notice that green line is more strongly entrenched in MJO phase 3 and into MJO phase 4. Now, those, specifically phase 3 and then to 4, those are not good phases if you want cold and winter weather in the eastern U.S. So it didn't make it into phases 8 and 1 as some of the models were forecasting early in the month, but instead, convection started getting more concentrated in the Indian Ocean into phase 3, and then eventually the MJO rotated into the maritime continent, the convection phase 4, and that really was not a good thing for the eastern U.S. If we look at the sea surface temperature anomalies in January 2023, the snippet here in the upper left is for 13 January 2023, and then the bottom right here is for the 27th of January 2023. So I did 2 weeks apart here on the sea surface temperature anomalies, and you'll notice some changes here with the La Nina signature specifically across the eastern portions of the equatorial Pacific off the coast of Peru in South America. You'll notice now that these colors are no longer very dark blue. They're starting to become more peach colored. And that's indicative of some warming temperatures off the coast of South America, the west coast of South America. Started happening around the 13th of January. You still see the blue shading here towards the central portions of the equatorial Pacific. That's associated with that La Nina still. But if you look down here in the lower right, what happened over time, by the end of January, again, we're seeing the disappearance more and more of that colder than normal water temperature situation off the west coast of South America, becoming more of a light orangish color, which indicates warming temperatures, water temperatures. And then you notice too that even the coloring of some of this blue here in the central equatorial Pacific starts becoming less dark and lighter, indicating on the scale here now that we're not seeing as strongly cold temperature anomalies in the water across this particular area of the tropical Pacific. Additionally, you'll start noticing with so many storm systems that just were moving into the western coast of the United States, a lot of that storm energy, a lot of that wind energy stirred the waves up along the eastern portions of the Pacific, of the North Pacific, and now we're starting to see blue shading extending all the way down from the Pacific Northwest to Southern California. A lot of the mixing of that surface layer of water with water that's much deeper, the wind brings up that cooler water from below, and look at this, we're starting to turn things into more of a negative Pacific decadal oscillation pattern as well. And by the way, this negative Pacific decadal oscillation, negative PDO, has really shown itself in March and even in early April. It's very much alive and well, the negative PDO right now. This has changed, but so overall, the main message here into January for sea surface temperature anomalies is the magnitude of below normal temperatures associated with La Nina were diminishing. Here's the Nino 3.4 water temperature anomalies for January 2023, and this is showing a general warming by January 13th. And then over here in the bottom right, we see even a greater warming by January 27th. So look at the values of the Nino 3.4, the departures from normal of the water temperatures in Nino 3.4 region. January 13th, negative 1.05 degrees Celsius. By 27th of January, the temperature anomalies are now only minus 0.96 degrees Celsius. So we went from a moderate level La Nina during the winter to a weaker La Nina stage by the end of January. Looking at the stratospheric polar vortex in January 2023, we're generally looking at a very strong polar vortex in the stratosphere initially. This is the 1st of January. This is New Year's Day on the left. You notice how circular these solid white lines are, these height contours are at 30 millibars, a very circular shape. The stratospheric polar vortex pretty strong at this point over the pole. And then over here in the middle graphic, by the 15th of January, things are starting to change again in the stratosphere, specifically these temperatures. Look at the yellow shading here at the top of this middle diagram here showing a stratospheric warming starting to occur. We're starting to see a weakening of the stratospheric polar vortex and elongation of these solid white height lines here. And then by the end of the month of January 2023, look at this now. The polar vortex is being stretched out again in the stratosphere, and it's also being displaced off the pole. Look at the position difference between 1 January here and the position of the polar vortex in the stratosphere. And now look at over here. By the end of the month, 31st of January, it is pretty much stretched out and displaced. It's weakened again. And look at all these yellow colorings in the stratosphere showing warming occurring. Some of the January 2023 highlights, more closer to home locally in the Norfolk International Airport, generally showing that 2023, in January 2023, was actually was the 5th warmest January on record since records began in the late 1890s for the Norfolk area. These are the mean temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit. So January 2023 for Norfolk, Virginia, from the airport showed it being the 5th warmest January on record with a mean temperature of 47.84 degrees Fahrenheit. Pretty impressive. And this just shows you the bar graphs over time from the 1940s all the way over to 2023, and kind of gives you that comparison of the mean temperatures over time. This blue line, by the way, right here is your average line. And then continuing that discussion closer to home, in Virginia Beach, January 2023 daily temperature departures. Now, this was something else. January, very mild month. You kind of see what's going on here. So New Year's Day, it was 18.4 degrees above normal high temperature. By the 2nd of January, it was 22.4 degrees Fahrenheit above normal high temperature. The 3rd of January, 23.4 degrees Fahrenheit above normal for the high. And then the 4th of January, 23.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Look at the first 5 days of January alone, in excess of 18 degrees Fahrenheit above normal for the high temperature. And then really throughout the month, I mean, the pluses continue. The pluses continue for the majority of the month of January. There was another exceptionally warmer period between the 18th and the 20th with a range of 16 to about 22 degrees Fahrenheit above normal high temperatures. And then, it just continued. There was a brief cool down here on around the 14th, 15th, where we actually saw some negative values. Overall, the breakdown for January 2023 for Virginia Beach, Virginia, 4 days were below average as far as high temperature goes. 4 days out of 31. So we saw 27 days with above average high temps in Virginia Beach for January 23. And then we saw 11 days below average for low temperatures and 19 days above average for low temperatures. So this was an extremely lopsided month as far as temperatures go for the Virginia Beach area. Again, here's some summary highlights down here below. Very mild month overall. There was no measurable snowfall for Virginia Beach, really for the Hampton Road cities. We did see those snow flurries on the 14th. We had cold northerly winds working their way down the fetch of the Chesapeake Bay, resulting in some bay streamer effects, really just some flurries. That was about it. And then towards the end of January, conditions really could have been more favorable for wintry precip along the eastern seaboard, but that baroclinic zone, the coldest temps, remained well to the northwest. It was a battle at this point by late January between between this ridge right here. This colder air, this Arctic air, was trying to work its way southeast, but when you run into a ridge of this magnitude, it just can't go any further to the southeast. It's like running into a brick wall. And so it was a battle between the southeast ridge and the colder air, Arctic air upstream in the troughing, and the ridge won. The ridge won that war. Bottom line. So again, looking at the mean temperature departures here for January 2023 Virginia Beach, the month finished 6.5 degrees Fahrenheit above normal with a mean precipitation departure of plus 1.04 inches of precip. And that's all liquid. So it's just over an inch of rain, inch of precipitation above normal. Just a very mild month. That was the main theme of January 23. Now let's move into the upper air pattern discussion. Let's take a look at the month of February of 2023. Starting with the upper air charts. Now this graphic here on the left is for 1 February. Look at this theme. Just pay attention to the orange coloring from the Gulf Coast up to New England, all along the eastern seaboard as I progress through these. This was the 1st of February, a very strong 588 decameter subtropical ridge, subtropical high there over Key West. with its axis extending north along the eastern seaboard. And look at how deep these troughs are over Southern California and Northern Baja. An extremely deep trough at this point to start the month of February. We did see a very deep closed upper level low, very cold over northern Hudson Bay. But again, this Arctic air is trying to move to the southeast, but it can't do it because this ridge is so strong. It's so very strong. As this trough was digging and getting deeper, this ridge was basically getting stronger and stronger. If we look over here on the right, this was the 500 millibar chart for Friday the 10th of February, and just look at this, folks. Look how strong. Now you notice the position of the ridge did move a little bit further to the east-northeast. It's now located to the east of Florida by the 10th of February, but that really doesn't matter because that ridge axis is extending from the southeast to the northwest. Look at how anomalously high these heights were from the mid-Atlantic to New England. In the central U.S. there, specifically from Nebraska, further down into eastern Colorado, western Kansas, into parts of New Mexico, there was a little bit of troughing that occurred around the 10th of February. We do see a little bit of ridging from Nevada extending northward towards Alberta, province of Canada. And then there's a deeper trough there developing just off the Pacific Northwest coast by the 10th of February. Let's move forward now. 15 February on the left. Look at this troughing. I mean, seriously. Now we're starting to see ridging build oriented. The axis is oriented, the ridge axis from southwest to northeast across the Northeast Pacific. And now we have shorter wavelengths here. Now this is what's resulting in very, very deep closed upper level low and a deep trough across the desert southwest. And then as this digs deeper into the southwestern U.S., this ridge builds downstream over the mid-Atlantic, extending north towards the Ohio Valley and into parts of southeastern Canada, including the Toronto area. We do see some troughing there offshore off the North Atlantic. Notice one thing here by 15 February. Where's that strong upper level ridging, that negative NAO that existed in December? It's nowhere to be found. We have the strongest ridging over here in the Northeast Pacific. If we look over here on the right, we're showing you the Monday 20 February upper air chart. Look at how much stronger this upper level closed high is off the west coast, Pacific Northwest coast of the United States. This thing is a monster, folks. And as this ridge got stronger, this closed low beneath it really was hanging out off the Southern California coast for a while. And then, you're looking at this chart here and you're seeing that very cold core upper level low, very low heights here over parts of northern Hudson Bay. The green coloring very cold northwest flow here across central Canada. But the problem is this ridge again. This ridge isn't budging. So the higher heights remain from the Gulf Coast, working their way to the mid-Atlantic up to New England. This cold air in this trough just can't advance to the southeast. This ridge is just providing too much resistance. Looking ahead now, this was the map for 25 February 2023. This thing's just a monster ridge. It's just not going anywhere. Now we got the ridge oriented to more east-west, but it's extending across the eastern Gulf of Mexico and Florida. And this ridge just continues to just dominate from northeast Texas to the mid-Atlantic. The coldest temperatures and the lowest heights are going to remain well out of the north over the Arctic, over Canada. And now look at this little beast of a system coming in by the 25th of February that came into Northern California. And then finally over here on the right for the upper air pattern for February, troughing, that negative PNA theme continues along the west coast of the United States. So just storm after storm comes diving in through the base of this trough. And you basically get, the ridge did let up a little bit by this point by 28 February, if you want to consider that a consolation prize. But in general, this pattern just did not favor much of winter in the eastern U.S. If we look at temperature anomalies for February 2023, we generally see, this is the 1st of February, we saw temperatures on the order of 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit above normal from New Orleans and Pensacola, extending northeastward to Atlanta, as well as Carolinas. We saw extremely below normal temperatures as the trough was digging into parts of Oklahoma and Texas by the 1st of February. Look how cold temperatures are to the west of the Appalachians. A little bit below normal up over New England, but not much. Over here on the right shows temperature anomalies in degrees Fahrenheit here for the 10th of February. Look at that ridge. It's just so evident how much this ridge just really built here at this point. Between the 1st on the left and the 10th of February on the right, we're talking about temperature anomalies in the order of 30 to 35 degrees Fahrenheit for eastern portions of Ohio, West Virginia, parts of western Pennsylvania. I mean, you wonder why these ski resorts in West Virginia close so early in the season. This is the map that describes it all right here. But in general, look at the only pocket of cold air by the 10th or below normal temps by the 10th of February is across Texas, New Mexico up to Colorado and Wyoming, right in this area. Moving ahead now to 15 February temperature anomalies. Look at this. I mean, this is like a nation divided right here. I could draw a vertical line straight down the center of this U.S. map, and you would know exactly what's happening. We've got a huge ridge across the Midwest, extending all the way eastward to the East Coast. Look at how much above normal temperatures were in southeastern Canada by the 15th of February. And look at the West Coast, below normal. Just basically the Rocky Mountains westward to the West Coast, below normal temperatures. In fact, by the 15th of February, temperatures were as much as 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit below normal across southern Nevada. It was snowing in Vegas in February, for goodness sake. Places like Vegas had more snow than places further up into New England, like New York City. And then over here on the right, temperature anomalies. This was for the 20th of February. The death ridge. I like to call the southeast ridge a death ridge in winter because literally it just keeps producing this kind of unusual warmth. And unfortunately, winter doesn't happen very often when you see this kind of setup going on. Moving ahead to the 25th of February, we see some colder temperatures plunging to the northern plains, right on down to Texas. We're talking about temperatures on the order of 25 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit below normal across eastern Montana and the Dakotas, all the way down to Texas. And then, as this trough was digging into the central U.S., here comes the ridge from the Gulf of Mexico, Florida, working its way northeastward to the mid-Atlantic. Look at this. Temperatures on the order of 14 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit above normal for southern Georgia, Atlanta, Myrtle Beach, right on up to Charlotte, up into Virginia, to Charlottesville. Look at this. I mean, this is just amazing. Over here on the right shows temperature anomalies in degrees Fahrenheit, and it just continues. It just continues. The West has a negative PNA in the trough. The East, the Midwest and the East have the ridge. And there you go. 20 to 25 degree Fahrenheit above normal temperatures on 28 February for Memphis, for parts of Kentucky, Lexington, Cincinnati across the Ohio River, as well as portions of southern Indiana. Let's take a look at the teleconnections for February 2023. We'll first start with the Arctic Oscillation. So what happened with the AO in February? Outside of the middle part of February, around the 16th to 17th of February, the AO was pretty much strongly positive throughout the month of February. That's definitely not what you want to see if you want cold and wintry precip for the eastern U.S. This is just not a good sign at this point. The North Atlantic Oscillation, what happened in February 2023? Positive. Positive, positive, positive. It's almost like the NAO made up for the strongly negative tendency in December. It made up for that by flipping to the positive side in February. Extremely strongly positive NAO in February, and it did not really transition to negative until early March, and that was in response to a major sudden stratospheric warming. Looking at the PNA, Pacific North American, the phases for February 2023, we saw a persistently negative PNA set up through the month. This allowed for a trough to remain parked over the western U.S. and that downstream ridge over the eastern U.S. Here's the negative tendency showing up here on the far right, bottom right graphic here. There was no change to this. For the Mount-Julian Oscillation in February, to make matters worse, what happened here on the left shows the green line here, showing MJO rotating from phase 3 right into phase 4. Look at this, phase 4 is warmer winter phases. Okay, and it rotates slowly into phase 5, and then finally into the null phase. And then this snippet here on the far right is from the 10th of March. February 24th. The forecast was 10 March over here on the right. It shows the MJO on the 10th of March in the null phase, but this really did happen in March. I mean, the MJO rotated from null phase out into the phase 7 and very strong phase 8 into March, but it was too little too late by that point for the winter season. And this was in response to the NAO going negative in March, the post effects of a major sudden stratospheric warming. Now, that sudden stratospheric warming occurred during the month of February, but it takes some time for those effects to be felt at the surface, a good 2 to 4 weeks. So really by this point, going to phase 8 in March, winter was pretty much a done deal. Looking at the sea surface temperature anomalies in February 2023, here in the upper left is the February 1st anomalies. The bottom right, I'm showing you February 28th, the end of the month. So look at the transition continuing here over off the west coast of South America. We're starting to see some warmer than normal waters there off the west coast of South America, and even the cooler than normal waters across the central portions of the equatorial Pacific continue to weaken. So La Nina is weakening. By the end of the month, wow, what a difference here. Especially if you compare right off the coast here of Western South America or off the coast of Peru. Now we got completely orange colors, and even the length, the shape of the below normal waters across the equatorial Pacific are no longer there as the La Nina continues to weaken by late February. And then again, look at how strongly negative or below normal the water temperatures are from the west coast of Canada all the way down the U.S. west coast. And just phenomenal negative PDO that's set up by this point. And then let's take a look at the Nino 3.4 water temperature anomalies for February 2023, what it looked like. Initially on the 3rd of February here in the upper left, we had a value of minus 0.92 degrees Celsius below normal. And then over here in the bottom right, by the 24th of February, look how this has climbed between mid-February and the 24th, the end of February. Look how much this has climbed now. Water temperature anomalies in Nino 3.4 region, by this point, are hovering around minus 0.5 degrees Celsius. So, it took a while, and that was my big question going into the winters. All the forecast models were predicting the La Nina to weaken and transition to ENSO neutral, but it just took its sweet old time here beyond, as we got towards late portions of winter, and it was just too little too late. Looking at the stratospheric polar vortex for February 2023, there was some major changes in the stratosphere in February 23. Specifically, the warming that occurred. We had a major sudden stratospheric warming. Look at the orange coloring here. This is the temperature scale here on the right, showing the temperature in degrees Celsius. The temperatures are warming drastically in the stratosphere by, this was the 18th of February right here. So we had a major sudden stratospheric warming occur between the middle of the month to 15th to the 21st of February. And that warming, those abnormally warm temperatures indicated by the yellow and orange colors continued all the way to 28th February. This major sudden stratospheric warming, again, those effects aren't really felt until 2 to 4 weeks after the event. And so we had an anomalously cold period across the eastern U.S. from March 8th to March 15th. Actually, for a large chunk of the United States, we had an anomalously cold temperature period post-stratospheric warming effects. But again, we're playing with the March sun. It's getting stronger. The daylight hours are increasing. And, all those things are working against those colder temperatures by March. Looking at the February 2023 highlights for the Norfolk, Virginia area. We talked about January already as being the 5th warmest. How about February 2023 temperature-wise? Finished with a mean temperature above 50 degrees Fahrenheit at 50.7. That made it the 4th warmest February on record for Norfolk. In fact, if you look at this chart more closely in the years, 3 of the top 6 warmest Februaries have occurred basically only going back to 2017. So one there in 2017, a record warm February. There's one in 2018, and now there's one in 2023. So, the tendencies are there that the warming is continuing, it's accelerating. The frequency above normal winter months is becoming more frequent overall. Looking at the February 2023 daily temperature departures for Virginia Beach, another very mild month overall, no measurable snowfall. The snow chances for the Hampton Road cities in coastal southeastern Virginia generally run from about 20 January to the 15th of February. That's usually the sweet spot I look for. Anything outside those area, that specific time window, you can still get some snowstorms, you can still get some snow. But I really target 20 January to 15 February. Climatologically, that's where we typically get the accumulating snows in Hampton Roads, Virginia cities. Nothing this past winter. The mean temperature departure for February was even warmer than it was for January. 7.3 degrees Fahrenheit above normal for Virginia Beach in February, and then the mean precipitation departure slightly drier than normal by 15/100ths of an inch, not drastic. And you look at the overall temperature departures from normal throughout every day of the month, the daily temperature departures from normal. We did have some really, really warm periods. The 8th and 9th of February, 14.3 and 20 degrees Fahrenheit above normal high temperatures. Another warm period, 15 and 16 February, in excess of 20 degrees Fahrenheit above normal high temperatures. Another warm period, 21 to 23 February. There were a lot of record highs set on the 23rd of February across the eastern U.S. We had 27.3 degree Fahrenheit above normal high temperatures and a low temperature on the 23rd, 31.1 degrees Fahrenheit above normal for Virginia Beach. Just insane. And the summary here of below versus above average temperatures, it continued from January right into February with a strong subtropical ridge dominating the eastern U.S. We saw only 7 days below average for high temps, 21 days above average for high temps, and then 8 days below average for low temperatures and 20 days above average for low temperatures. Just some crazy, crazy numbers. Not many negatives or below normal temperatures. We started off the month with some below normal temperatures, the 1st through the 4th. Had a chill to the air. But then after that, oh boy, this is a hard pill to swallow if you like winter weather. All right, that wraps up my winter 2022-23 winter in review video. This is part 2. I decided to tackle both January and February to kind of piece it together in one video. This is where to find us on social media, by the way. We really don't do a lot of work on Instagram. We do have an account set up there. We've kind of gone away from Facebook more, but we still do post on Facebook at times, so you can find us there. Definitely on Twitter is where Spot On Weather, where we're more active. So check us out there. These are some of the websites as well, from Facebook, Instagram, to Twitter, as well as our website right here. Check it out. There's a lot of cool stuff on our website, spot-on-weather.com. And, you can always subscribe to our newsletter. Try to get that out on Thursdays. Been kind of busy lately. I haven't been able to push a newsletter out. So hopefully next week I get back into the swing of things there from the newsletter. But anyway, during the summer season, I'm going to go to an every other week type newsletter. During the winter season, I do weekly newsletters on Thursdays for the most part. All right, that wraps things up tonight. Spot On Weather. Hopefully you got something good out of this video as far as information. I think this is a good way to go to really reflect on the past winter and review, just to kind of see how things shook out that shaped the winter that was. Next winter it'll be interesting because we're going to be heading towards an El Nino winter again. I'm really hopeful it's not too strong of El Nino, because I've seen strong El Nino winters, and I think it's very much above normal temperature-wise in the eastern U.S. if the El Nino gets very strong. A good example of that was the 2015-16 winter season. Christmas was 80 degrees. I just couldn't believe that. But anyway, that's all I got for now. Until next time, everybody, take care and God bless.